I stood in the marble foyer while his family watched. A server dropped a tray. Someone laughed. The man at the head of the table looked through me and said I was late. Chairs scraped. Eyes turned. No one spoke for me. No one asked why. My phone buzzed in my bag, unanswered. The clock ticked too loud. I felt heat on my face and kept my hands still. I did not explain the empty lunch bag. I did not explain the cold sidewalk. I waited, quiet, as the judgment settled. Around me, promises hung brittle and nobody moved there. The man who spoke was not loud. He did not need to be. His voice traveled because everyone leaned toward it. He asked my fiancé to sit. He asked me to stand. The order felt old, practiced. I obeyed. My fiancé glanced at the floor. He did not reach for my hand. The room accepted this as normal. The questions came in a neat line. Where had I been? Why was I late? Did I understand the value of time? Each question landed and waited. I answered with simple words. Traffic. A stop. I did not say more. Silence grew heavy. A woman across the table smiled as if patience were a favor. The authority in that room was not just the man at the head. It lived in the walls, in the staff who paused mid-step, in the family who watched without blinking. I felt measured. I felt replaceable. When I finished speaking, the man nodded once and said we would continue without apology. The chair beside my fiancé remained empty. Dinner moved forward like a train. Courses arrived. Glasses filled. No one addressed me again. I stood until my legs shook, then sat when a server whispered that I could. I thanked her. She looked away. My fiancé's mother cleared her throat. She mentioned schedules and expectations, how families depend on discipline. She did not look at me. The message was clean. Being chosen required compliance. Being late erased context. The table hummed with agreement. I thought about the sidewalk. The way the wind cut. The man's hands trembling as he held the sandwich like proof that someone saw him. I swallowed the memory. I kept my back straight. I counted breaths. After dinner, the man announced a walk through the house. He invited questions. No one asked any. We followed him down halls lined with portraits. Each face looked certain. I lagged behind. My heel clicked wrong. He stopped and turned. He said guests keep pace. I apologized. The apology felt rehearsed though it was new. At the library door, he dismissed the staff. He asked my fiancé to stay. He asked me to wait outside. The door closed softly. I stared at the wood grain. I listened to nothing. Minutes passed. The hallway felt like a test too. When the door opened, my fiancé's eyes were careful. He said it was fine. He said his father wanted order. He said I should try harder. His words were gentle. Their meaning was not. He walked ahead of me. I followed, smaller than before. I learned something then about rules that bend toward power. The test was not fairness but obedience. The man decided the measure and the moment. Everyone else adjusted. When a cousin joked about tradition, laughter arrived on cue. When I shifted in my chair, a glance corrected me. The authority chose convenience over truth, and silence kept it clean. I could have explained. I could have named the stop and the hunger. The room did not want that. It wanted alignment. My fiancé knew this. He had grown inside it. He chose quiet because quiet kept the evening smooth. That choice cut more than the questions. It said my reason would be trouble. It said my delay was mine alone. I felt the weight of being useful until I was not. I pressed my napkin flat and watched crumbs disappear, neat as evidence swept away. Nothing moved except breathing, and the house seemed pleased with the order it kept, while my presence learned the cost of asking for understanding in that moment alone. The next week settled into a rhythm that felt familiar once I noticed it. Small moments lined up and pointed the same way. Invitations arrived late or not at all. Plans changed without notice. When I asked questions, answers stayed vague. When mistakes happened, they seemed to land on me even when I was not involved. At work, I was used to clear rules. At home with my fiancé's family, rules shifted. His father called it flexibility. His mother called it tradition. I called it guessing. Guessing took energy. Guessing kept me quiet. I remembered other rooms, other tables. A professor who praised my work until funding ran short, then stopped returning emails. A manager who promised growth, then gave credit elsewhere because it was easier. The pattern had a shape. Praise when convenient. Distance when inconvenient. I had learned to smooth edges and move on. At the mansion, that lesson deepened. His father invited my fiancé to private meetings. I was told later what had been decided. Finances were discussed without me, though my name appeared on papers. When I asked to read them, I was told trust mattered more than details. I nodded and asked for time instead. At dinners, stories were shared that painted me as an addition, not a person. Someone would say, "She's adjusting," and everyone would agree. Adjusting sounded temporary. Adjusting sounded patient. It meant waiting. Once, his father asked about my childhood. I answered briefly. He listened with interest, then said resilience was attractive. He said it like a compliment. It felt like a label. Resilient people absorb impact. They do not break things. I watched how others were treated. A cousin arrived late and laughed it off. A friend questioned a decision and was indulged. I arrived early and stayed silent and still felt behind. The difference was not behavior. It was position. My fiancé noticed pieces, but not the whole. When I tried to explain, he softened his voice. He said his father was complex. He said love looked different in powerful families. He said patience paid off. I heard the same words I had heard before. Be reasonable. Be flexible. Be grateful. The memory of the sidewalk returned at odd times. The cold. The quiet exchange. How simple it had been to act without asking permission. How complicated everything felt now. I started keeping notes. Dates. Comments. Decisions made without me. Not for revenge. For clarity. The list grew. Each line was small. Together, they formed a map. I saw where I stood on it. Always near the edge. Always optional. At a lunch with his mother, she spoke kindly about the future. She mentioned expectations again. She said joining a family meant adapting to its values. I asked which values were non-negotiable. She smiled and said harmony. I asked who defined it. She changed the subject. That was when it became clear. This was not a misunderstanding to fix. It was a system that worked as designed. Some people were centered. Others circled. I had been circling my whole life, useful and quiet. The realization did not hurt the way I expected. It steadied me. Seeing the pattern meant I could stop blaming single moments. It meant the test was ongoing, and passing meant disappearing a little more each time. The boundary was crossed on a Tuesday. Papers arrived by courier, thick and warm from the printer. My name sat beside figures that made my stomach tighten. It was a guarantee, framed as support, tied to a venture I had never approved. The note said signatures were needed before dinner. I asked for time. I asked to speak with a lawyer. The room went still. My fiancé frowned, not angry, just tired. His father said urgency protected opportunity. He said family did not stall progress. He slid a pen toward me. I felt the old pull to comply. I felt the weight of eyes. I imagined smooth evenings restored if I signed. I also imagined years of quiet risk, my future tethered, without consent. The choice stood clean and narrow. I said I would not sign today. The word "not" landed softly. No one raised a voice. His father leaned back and studied me like a calculation. He said refusal had consequences. He said he had expected better alignment. My fiancé spoke then. He said this was how things worked. He said love meant trust. He did not say my name. He did not ask what I needed. Something closed in me with a small sound. The conversation moved on as if my answer were a delay, not a decision. Dinner was announced. A server cleared the papers, stacking them neatly. I watched the pen disappear. I realized how often my consent had been assumed, borrowed, translated. That night, I packed a bag. Not everything, just enough. I left a note that said I needed space. It was true and incomplete. I did not explain. Explanation had become a currency I could no longer afford. In the quiet, I stopped asking for belonging. I stopped rehearsing how to be acceptable. The relief surprised me. Fear stayed, but it stood back. The next morning, messages arrived. Concern first, then pressure, then warnings dressed as care. I read them without replying. I scheduled an appointment. I opened a new account. I forwarded documents to myself. Each step was small and solid. I walked past the cafe where I had once shared a lunch. The door was open. Warm air moved out to meet me. I kept walking, steady, carrying a boundary I would not set down again. It felt like choosing gravity, letting it hold me without asking permission. For once, finally, I withdrew without drama. I canceled joint plans. I returned keys through a courier. I stopped attending dinners. Silence did the work words could not. My lawyer sent a letter declining any guarantee and requesting copies of documents bearing my name. The response arrived fast and sharp. The venture stalled. Questions surfaced. Banks asked why a signature had been assumed. Advisors asked who authorized what. In answering them, his father spoke more than he meant to. The story shifted. Control looked like haste. Tradition looked like pressure. Socially, the tone changed. Invitations paused. Smiles cooled. My fiancé called once, then stopped. I did not chase. I moved apartments. I kept my job. Life narrowed and steadied. Weeks later, I was invited back to the mansion. I declined. A second message followed, careful and formal. It asked for a meeting. I agreed to a public place. He arrived early. He wore a simple coat. For a moment, memory overlaid the present. The cold sidewalk. The shared sandwich. He looked at me and nodded. He said he had learned enough. He said the test was never about time. It was about what people did when no one was watching. I listened. I did not defend myself. I did not thank him. He said the family would proceed without my involvement. He said my refusal had clarified risks. He said he respected the choice. Respect sounded like distance. Consequences unfolded quietly. Contracts were rewritten. Roles changed. Stories adjusted to save face. The family learned who would sign and who would not. I learned who I was when pressure arrived. I kept my silence. I kept my boundary. I kept moving. Kindness had not ruined my future. It had revealed it. When I passed someone shivering outside a store, I did not think of tests. I thought of warmth. I bought soup. I handed it over. I walked on, unremarkable and intact. The world did not applaud. It simply made space. Work filled mornings. Evenings were quiet. I slept better. I trusted my no. Somewhere, a table was set without me, and it held. Somewhere else, a bench waited, and I would sit if needed, carrying lunch, untested, choosing freely. That was enough for a life that belonged to me, steady, honest, open to chance, grounded, forward, quiet, and whole at last. I kept walking into days that asked nothing but presence and care.